Shalom, welcome to Rivkush, a CJN podcast featuring conversations with Jews of color discussing all things Jewish. Today, I'm so pleased to have Charly Wai Feldman. She is an amazing documentary director and producer, a graduate of McGill University, and she's of Chinese, Jewish, and Canadian descent. She has made films in, it seems like, over 20 countries, which is mind-boggling to me. So we're going to unpack the life of Charly Feldman and, of course, discuss the work that she has done. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is super cool. So tell me about you, because off camera, if you will, off mic, if you will, we started discussing, because I had asked Charly how to pronounce her name, and go ahead and tell the story about the pronunciation of your name and a little bit about your background growing up.
Great. So thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. And it's just one of those identities that gets it's a little confusing to talk about in a casual conversation. So it's kind of nice to be in a space where we can actually focus on that and just be among peers who also feel similar things. So I'm very excited to be here. I was born in Montreal. My father's Jewish Canadian. My mother is from Hong Kong, converted before we were born so that, the family would be okay with the whole intermarriage thing. And then we moved at first we moved to Jamaica, then we moved to Vietnam.
I'm sorry, you moved to where?
Jamaica, when I was like a baby.
Okay, we need to pause on that for a moment here.
Yeah.
How in the world did you end up how do you end up in Jamaica?
I think my dad was just always a little bit seeking somewhere else to call home. And I guess when he worked in manufacturing in Montreal, and it was a time where manufacturing was sort of dying down, and the industry was looking for opportunities elsewhere, and it looked like, hey, maybe Jamaica. I mean, I think that was honestly his
Wow.
His affinity to reggae music and all of the lifestyle and all of that. And I think he just decided that was where he wanted to call home for a while. And then business-wise, it didn't work out. So then at that time, we're talking about late 80s, Vietnam started to open up to non-Americans. So Canadians, Australians, all of that started to travel there as seeing an opportunity before Americans could come. And so we kind of landed there. My parents separated, and we ended up being raised by my father in Vietnam, going to a French lycée, which, for those not familiar, like the French lycée is bent on assimilating whoever's there. So by the time I was 18 years old, we were, I felt French for some strange reason that baffles me to this day.
Wow.
But yeah, and as I was saying to Rivka, Rivka, my Chinese side is still a bit of an enigma to me. Like, I don't speak Chinese. I identify strongly with Hong Kong and the struggles it's been through over the past few years, but I don't have the same tie, I would say, to my Cantonese side as I have to my Jewish side. Like, I am fully immersed in Jewish culture. It is something that is in my blood. I am raising my children Jewish, and yet it's, there's this whole other half of me that I haven't engaged with yet.
Yeah. And do you hope one day to explore that side of you, or how do you feel about that?
I think that I've come to a point now where all these different parts of my background, combined with my husband, who has an equally confusing background,
which is?
He's Indian, but grew up as what you call a Navy brat in India, which means you go from Navy base to Navy base. Wow. And then he left when he was 14 for Germany and then Singapore. And he's a bit from all over the place. And so he's now Singaporean, but is as nomadic as I am, really. And
I was going to say there's some similarities there.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I think your family sounds so incredibly diverse and so rich.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is why, okay, I can, in terms of where to put my energy right now, it's like as I raise my children, what is the sense of identity we want to give to them? And so the Chinese side is important, but I think the multicultural side is more important than focusing on like the Chinese side. And I think the Jewish thing is important to me for many reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it's we're trying to figure out how to define it. And if the Chinese side, the Cantonese side, hasn't been that prominent in my life, I kind of can't force it at this moment because I feel like
It's
I
a fair
have,
point.
yeah, I have a huge can of worms in terms of like,
Yeah, that's a fair
what,
point.
how to raise these children.
Yeah. Wow. So how many
Yeah.
children do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I have
Well, I
two
already did.
kids. Two kids, 3 and 1. So we had them very close
Oh.
together and during the pandemic. So yeah.
Oh, I have no words for that.
Yeah.
My kids are very close in age too. They were 20 months apart. So
Oh wow, yeah.
it's its own little challenge.
It is.
I say to people, they say, well, at least they weren't twins. I said, but twins tend to go through the same developmental period at
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
you know?
try like 5 consecutive years of nappy changing.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
like twins are out by the time they're okay, 3 maybe, like if you want to
And you're
stretch it.
done.
And you're
Yeah,
done.
and you're done. So yeah, yeah, I get that. Um, wow, I'm just like, this is your background is so cool. So tell me a little bit more about, because you articulated that the Judaism is very important to you, and is, you know part of, obviously, of who you are. So how does that manifest itself, and did you find that you had any, because I, speaking for myself, sometimes there's been struggles around me presenting as I do, my children presenting as they do, because they are also, I like to say, Heinz 57, a mixed bag of everything and then some. And and really navigating the community, and who I am in terms of how I fit in. So tell me, do you share any of that? Would you like to elaborate a
Definitely.
bit?
Definitely. I mean, when I heard about this podcast, I was so excited because one of my projects has been like dream projects has been to publish a book with just photos being like Jewish in 2023, like, or whatever
Do it,
year,
do
but
it,
just like
do
this
it.
is what we look like.
Yeah, do
Uh,
it.
but I remember because I mean I grew up in a Jewish diaspora community and very much I would dip into the Montreal Jewish community, which is very tight knit, but
Mhm.
in Vietnam it was a kind of mishmash of like Jewish people from around the world. Maybe we were maybe a total of 40 people who would get together during high holidays. Um,
That's more
and
than I would have thought.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you had a lot of Israeli travelers who would join in
Okay.
and things like that. But there were. I mean, I grew up with like maybe two other Jewish kids who went to a different international school, and kind of dipped in and out. But I remember going to a Passover Seder in Singapore, and it was the first time I was introducing my husband to what Passover was, and he was very nervous. And we walk up, and there's a sort of bodyguard outside, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And we're like, "Well, we're here for Passover." And he looks at us, and he's like, "Are you Jewish?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." It's like, "Where are you from?" "Montreal." "Where in Montreal?" "Côte
Oh
Saint-Luc."
gosh.
And of course, you say Côte Saint-Luc, and like he immediately was like, "Okay, that's legit." But you have to go through these rounds of
Wow.
testing, and that kind of angst of like walking up to a kind of Jewish community diaspora event anywhere around the world. I always have this angst of like, oh, I'm gonna have to go through those hoops, that
Mhm.
challenge
Mhm.
again, like, and
Yeah.
that's really frustrating. And I think that it's become like a sort of cause for me to, I tell my husband that is what I want to give my children, is the confidence to walk into a Jewish community without feeling like they are other. And they can choose not to engage with it the same way I do, but I want them to have the option, and I want them to have the confidence to do it, that I feel I have to kind of build up to every single time I go
Oh,
to one
Charlie,
of
I
these
can
events.
so relate. I you know, oh, I just got a chill when you were saying that,
Yeah.
because I felt like I was standing right next to you.
Yeah.
And that feeling, I'm telling you, I work in the Jewish community. I'm often, and it still doesn't go away. It doesn't even go away when I come to my own place,
Yeah.
my own place of employment. I still in my little bubble of the office, it's cool. It's when I have to go to a bigger event, I still have that feeling of, okay, who's going to ask me something?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I felt like my heart hurt when you said that. And what you said about your hope for your children, oh God, I hope so too.
yeah,
I yeah, because we have to do better.
yeah, definitely. And I think that's, that is, part of my attachment to Jewish culture is that it kind of, in the letter, kind of encourages you to do better, to fight that fight, and it tells you, come on, you can do this. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
let's
you're
challenge
right.
it. Let's fight for this. Let's, like, undermine what's been told as the way it is, and let's try something different. And
Absolutely.
I remember reading an article a few years ago. Actually, my bubby sent it to me, and she was like, it was about Asian Jewish kids. At that point, I think that was like the most common intermarriage or something like that. And
Yes. Yeah.
and I think it was talking about how strongly they identified as Jewish, and that the first female rabbi in the U.S. was an Asian Jewish woman. And I was like, that's incredible. Like, and also that goes to show, like, I think because we don't look, obviously Jewish, we're sort of fighting a fight already. So you might as well, go the whole
Go
mile.
big.
Yeah, go
Go
big.
big. Go
Like, become a
big.
rabbi, a woman rabbi,
Become a rabbi and a cantor. She's
Exactly.
both.
Okay,
Like,
amazing.
she's a superstar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think we do. I think I'll never forget my mother saying, you have three strikes against you already.
Yeah.
So you have to be three times better than everyone else. And I think we do kind of hold that within ourselves, just to your point.
Yeah.
So it's like, because I find, I don't know if you feel this way too. Sometimes people are always testing me on my Judaism. Does she
Yeah.
really know these things? And I'm thinking to myself, you probably don't know it. So you don't even know if I'm giving you the right answer or not.
Totally.
So do you find that
Yeah,
sometimes?
definitely. And also because I didn't go to Hebrew school growing up, and I do have that insecurity. Oh, I don't know all these things, but like I spend time with my cousins who did go to Hebrew school, and my family, and in Montreal, and like, I love spending time with them. But I noticed that for some reason, maybe because I felt that insecurity, I've just engaged with a lot of these things really, really deeply in a very international context. And when I go to some events, sometimes it's very like, let's go through the motions. And it's not necessarily like, let's, like, let's engage with it, let's question it, let's this,
Right.
the thing I'll get is like, oh, why are you being so deep about it? Why are you being so, like, intense about it? But I'm like, I guess I had to engage with it to find
Right.
myself in some of this. And when you asked earlier, like, what was my relationship with it growing up, is like, I I always felt like, at least, I had a Canadian passport, but that didn't mean much. I had this French school, which was like a weird relationship. Vietnam, where I would never become, they don't allow citizenship or whatever for no matter how long you've lived in the country. So
Oh, I did
you're,
not know that.
yeah, you're always going to be a foreigner in Vietnam unless you are
Ah,
Vietnamese. And so I guess Judaism gave me this, like, borderless identity that I could dive into. And the whole principle of learning how to exist as a diaspora and being able to exist as a diaspora was just really hit home for me at a time where I was looking for that sense of belonging.
wow.
um, and there was also, every time someone came from Canada, from the Jewish community, it was like, oh, have you met the Feldmans in Hanoi? You need to meet the Feldmans in Hanoi. And so suddenly, as soon as a Jewish person came to Hanoi, we were like the delegates,
Nice.
like, in charge of making sure the Jewish community coming to Hanoi would be okay.
Okay. Can you say that phrase again? The borderless. I want to
Yeah.
remember that. What did you say about being the borderless?
Like, I think I've never truly identified with any of the flags that I'm associated with, but there was something about the Jewish identity that feels so borderless, that feels
I
like
love
I
that.
can connect with Jewish people from around the world, and we have reasons to connect. And it doesn't necessarily have to be talking about the kind of strictly religious things. It is so much part of a culture that has kind of gone beyond borders.
Right. I love the way you said that. I think that's the first time I've ever heard it in that context.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And I can no, it is. I've tried to articulate that connection that we have with Jews everywhere, that we just seem to inherently connect with each other in that global sort of way. But the term, the borderless, I absolutely love that. So I'm going to steal that from
Of
you.
course, go for it. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about your work.
Yes.
Um, I have to admit, I'm super jealous of what you do.
I mean, I feel like
I
you do some very similar thing. Like,
yeah, I'm just jealous of what you do. I've been working on a documentary now for 10 years, and working on that's I probably shouldn't use the term working. I've been thinking about it every now and then. It's probably a better term. So when I see people taking that creativity and producing and really, like, at your level, it's just I'm just in awe. I'm in awe. So I do want to talk about you said in over 20 countries. Please explain that.
yeah, I don't know what happened in my 20s, I guess, because I partnered with this production company that was just starting, and they were doing a lot of global films. And I just kind of was very, you know, a very yes woman at that time.
Okay.
We've got this project in Nepal. Yes. We've got this thing in Myanmar. Sure. We've got this thing in China. Okay. Like, can you go film in Guatemala? Okay, no problem.
Wow.
And so it just kind of happened that there was a point where I realized I was subletting my apartment for longer than I was actually living there.
Living in it.
And I just said, you know what, I'm giving up the apartment, or the room in the apartment, because it was
Uh-huh.
London. And I just lived out of a suitcase. And so after a few years of just like traveling around like that, I just spent another 4 years living out of a suitcase. Um,
Wow.
Wandering around, and I guess that's how I met my husband in Singapore, and he was doing a very similar thing, just kind of he'd have a shoot in Belize, and then I'd have a shoot in Guatemala, and so we'd meet like for 1 week in between, or yeah, that's how our relationship started. But a lot of those films were for television, and they come with
Okay.
like the television pace of things, which is, fast turnarounds, fast deadlines, low budgets. And I was dealing
Oh,
with a
okay.
lot of like heavy subject matter, a lot of
Such
trauma.
as?
Like human trafficking, women like selling brides, between Vietnam and China. Um,
Wow.
uh, the earthquake in Nepal in 2014,
Right.
um, the Myanmar elections, which that was a bit less traumatic, but child refugees from the Syrian war who had been in exile for over 3 years in Lebanon, and had, a pretty bleak prospect for the years to come of ever going back to Syria. Um, just, yeah, some really heavy
That's
subject
heavy
matter.
stuff.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that? Because while people can say, well, this is what she does, she's a professional, blah blah blah, but you are hearing and seeing tragedy, and even and recording it for history. But how does that affect you, Charly, as a person? Like,
It was definitely, it took its toll on me. And I kind of operated on this rhythm of like overwork, burnout.
wow.
And then I finally decided to slow things down a bit. And that's when I started the last documentary, which was just out at Hot Docs, where I met your colleague Michael. And
Right.
so that film took 4.5 years, and that was because I felt like I was running through traumatic stories, and I also couldn't give the people I was working with and myself the kind of aftercare you need when you're telling these kind of stories.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah, totally. And I felt like, the stories were always very important to tell, but two things. One, telling the story is one thing, making sure it gets an audience is another. So, I never knew when I was putting these things out on television who was watching, how they were reacting to it, and whether it was making a difference. And then I was then, had to rush off to the next thing without being able to take the time to process and also make sure that the people involved in the film had also taken the time to process what they had been through in the
Right.
process of filmmaking, because it opens up a lot of wounds for people who are engaging
Absolutely.
in filmmaking.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so this time we did take the time, but it was a really really intense 4.5 years, and I would say both Sarah Mardini, who's the main character in the film, and myself are doing our own healing on our own sides after this journey for different reasons. But I think a lot of her past caught up to her, a lot of my past caught up to me, the pandemic, all that stuff. For me, becoming a mother, I mean, all these things, suddenly you don't cope the same way. Once you're taking care of two children, you have to
Exactly.
you have to stop and make sure you're okay, because or else you can't do what you need to do as a
Yeah,
mother.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's a nice segue. I don't know
Yeah.
if nice. It's a segue
Yeah.
into,
Yeah.
because you mentioned Sarah Mardini,
Yes.
and so tell me. I don't know the story,
Hmm.
because I thought about googling it, but I want to hear it from you. So please tell me the genesis of this documentary and who she is and why. What led you to do this?
So the genesis for me was hearing that a 23-year-old volunteer on the shores of Europe had been arrested and accused of human trafficking, money laundering, being a spy, and could face 20 years in prison. So I sort of looked at this and I thought, what is going on? This is crazy. And then as I we looked into it. Well, actually, sorry, rewind. My
Okay.
producers actually knew Sarah Mardini and her story before she got arrested. So, Sarah Mardini has this incredible backstory. She was a champion swimmer in Syria along with her younger sister, Yusra. And the two of them were coached by their father to kind of compete in the Middle East, mostly at the time. And when the war kind of really hit close to home for them, they decided to escape. And during their escape, during the crossing from Turkey to
Hmm.
Greece, the boat that they were on, like a inflatable dinghy, started to sink. And as it was sinking, they had no choice. They jumped into the water and they swam for 3.5 hours to keep the boat afloat and to kind of keep steering it in the right direction. So
Wow.
um, they became incredibly famous for this story. They became probably the most famous refugees in Europe at the time. They made it safely to Germany, and
Uh-huh.
their story went viral and has since been made into a Netflix film called The Swimmers. And
Oh.
so that is the dramatized, like the fictionalized version of their backstory. What was even more incredible is after doing this, the younger sister, Yusra, decided to continue swimming, and she got into the very first refugee Olympic team and competed both in Rio in 2016 and in Tokyo in what became 2021. And so that is also part of this fiction film, which is obviously a very feel good film about these two incredible
Hmm.
sisters. Sarah could no longer compete. She was the older sister. She could no longer compete. And she was injured from her crossing. And she decided, okay, I'm going to go back to the shores of Europe and I'm going to help people who are making the same crossing I made. And I'm going to be an Arabic translator, a rescue swimmer, and just give blankets and water on the shoreline. And she was doing this when she got arrested. And so at the time when I got involved, Sarah Mardini was in prison, and it was like we didn't know how long she'd be held for. We thought, what the hell? How could she be accused of human trafficking and
Trafficking.
all these things? And very quickly, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International looked into it, and said this is bogus. This is part of a political, trend to call volunteers criminals in an attempt to discourage people from volunteering, in an attempt to discourage people from coming because they may think that volunteers will help them on the other side.
Wow.
This is all like the long story. I can give the shorter version of this.
No, I'm like, you've drawn me in.
Okay,
like,
cool.
I'm just like, holy cow.
Yeah, so Sarah was arrested along with another volunteer, Sean Binder. And they, after 3.5 months and a lot of sort of pressure from the, outside world, they were released, but they were only released on bail. And at this point, I meet Sarah in person, and I'm super moved by her. She's like this incredibly charismatic, intense, like young woman. She was 23 at the time, had lived many lives, and sort of had this attitude of like, bring it on.
Wow.
And not only bring it on, but also like, you know, she had escaped the war. She couldn't swim anymore. She almost drowned. She couldn't swim anymore. She went back to volunteer. She was arrested, and she was just like, I will not, my spirit will not be affected
Clearly,
by this.
Yeah, she will not be crushed.
Yeah, exactly. And wow. So I just realized I want to spend more time getting to know her, and I actually want this film to be as much about the political, trend that was going on, because that's important, but very much about what this young woman was going through at this point in her life, and also to give her that, to make it a collaboration as much as possible, to kind of make it in her voice, raw and as unfiltered as, whatever we could do to kind of bring out different parts of her story that she felt hadn't been told before, because she had done a lot of public speaking about it before. So it was kind of like, why am I making her repeat something that everybody knows is out there? And there's a Netflix film. That was why we kind of needed the creative space and the time to really tell the story the way we wanted to do it justice and to do her journey justice. So so we went the independent route for this film, and really gave it the time that it needed.
Yeah, because it was 4 years.
Yeah.
You said 4.5 years, which did sound like an extraordinary amount of time, but I understand just by what you said why it was.
Yeah. We didn't know where the story was going, and initially we thought, you know what, they're out on bail and they're waiting for a trial, so what, maybe in a year we'll have a trial and the film will be over, or in 2 years we'll have a trial. Mm-hmm. So we kept coming up with these schedules according to when this trial would happen. And then as time progressed, we just realized that trial's not coming. And if it is coming, which it did at the end of the film, all right, it's not really a trial. It's just further delaying justice.
So this has been released, correct?
Yes. Well, it's doing its festival circuit at the moment.
Well, you need to keep me posted on it.
Definitely.
Definitely. So you're currently based in the UK.
Yes. Yeah.
I caught that because you said nappies.
Yeah, I know. As I said it, I was like, oh, I should be saying diaper.
No, nappies is fine. I use some British isms that I sometimes have to pause and explain to people, but
yeah,
you can use British isms with me. I know them.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. The other thing that caught my eye, which I kind of love, is this. What is this? Brown Girls Doc Mafia.
Yeah, they're incredible. They're a group mostly like operating in the US, but they're pretty global. And a few years ago, a friend of mine kept urging me to join. And I said, and again, this is imposter syndrome, right? Like, it's not just in the Jewish community. I was like, well, I'm actually like half white. I don't know if I can be part of like a brown girls group. And she had to kind of convince me to say no, and this was, and it was interesting. This coincided with when Black Lives Matter was happening, and there were conversations, much more eloquent conversations happening about being a person of color. And suddenly, when like you don't realize, but something's uncomfortable your entire life, and then somebody puts words to it, and you're like, oh my gosh, those are the words I've been looking for forever.
Yes.
And I guess with a lot of the narrative that was coming out, I was like, yes, I am a person of color. I am not white. Like, I
But
was
you had
raised.
to come to that. You had to come to that.
Yeah, and I had to come to that because I was raised by my white father, who was like, you know, there are no obstacles in life, like this kind of male ego of like, don't whine and don't this and don't that. And I'm
Pull
like,
up your
it's not
bootstraps.
exactly like, just get on with it. And I kind of tried as much as I could to adhere to that, but I was like, there's some times I look in a room and I'm like, I am being treated differently, or there's no one who looks non-white.
Right.
And like, or my own white family, who again I adore, but like, like my, anyway, things have come where I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm not white, and
Yeah.
I just and so Brown Girls Doc Mafia was like a very safe space to be able to have these conversations, to talk about the implications of all this power dynamic in the documentary industry. And then very specifically, for example, for Hot Docs in 2019, the cost of going there would have been prohibitive. And I think Hot Docs realized that that was an issue for a lot of non-white filmmakers. I guess they for whatever reason they decided to subsidize tickets for all Brown Girls Doc Mafia members. And
Nice.
so so incredibly I was able to go to the festival, whereas before that I wouldn't have been able to.
So they made it more
And
equitable. They made it more
yeah,
equitable.
totally. Yeah, and it was incredible to see the difference between 2019, when we were very much like, we stood out and we were like, recruit, find other people like us, and and now, where it was like, oh, there's significantly more representation. The conversation has come so much further. You can see that there's been a big leap there, and Brown Girls Doc Mafia are definitely part of that
Oh,
narrative.
that is awesome, because
Yeah.
you can't overestimate how important it is for our voices, for our lenses to be, on certain issues that
Mm-hmm.
that need our perspective, because our perspective, based on just how we present to the world, is often different. And to understand, in my opinion, I can't emphasize how important it is for generations coming up to see organizations like Brown Girls Doc Mafia,
Yeah.
and to see themselves in you.
Totally. And like podcasts like yours. I mean, this podcast is incredible. And when I heard about it, I was like, yes, yes, yes. I was so excited to like to feel that sense of community and to be able to have these conversations. It's interesting, like living in London now, I'm sort of trying to find my Jewish community. And because I know raising kids, I don't have my extended family here. It's gonna be really hard for me to do this on my own. But I am seeking out like, who is the right rabbi for our family.
Your
And
global family, your
exactly,
global
like,
family.
who is the right person that will kind of, yeah, that where we don't have to feel that awkwardness, and we don't have to,
Exactly.
and do feel empowered.
Take your time. That's my only advice, is to take
Yeah.
your time, because it is so key and it's so important, especially for the little people, because to you want it to be a positive experience, as positive as you can make it, going
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
what you had said before about the future of your children, right? And it's so key to find that community where you don't have to justify why you're here, explain why you're here, tell them how you're Jewish, and all these
Yeah.
wonderful things that we seem to uh, sadly be destined to have to do, but hopefully won't be destined to have to do
Yeah.
at some
Yeah.
point. At
Yeah.
some
But I
point.
feel like there is like I mean, I feel like people like you are making such a big difference in
Thank
that,
you. But it's a
and it
community.
matters. Yeah,
It's a
but it
community.
matters. But it
Yeah.
matters that we stand out in that community.
Hmm.
That we're not just kind of sitting in the corner, which is what I tend to do sometimes when I go to like a Chabad or wherever around the world. I'm sort of like kind of shying away in the corner, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing what I have to do, but I'm a little bit shy and a little bit,
But you showed
awkward
up.
and
But you
intimidated.
showed
Yeah,
up.
definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
It's the first step, because there are times too, Charlie, where I am in that corner, but then I tell my no, I tell myself, but I am here.
Yes.
So even if I'm not ready to make that step to the middle of the room or the front of the room, I'm in the room. And most importantly, you see me in the room.
Yeah. Yep. That's
Right?
true.
You see me
100%.
in the room.
Yeah.
So it's tough sometimes, but it's also, I still think the diversity of us, and I will always think this is just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful
Totally.
thing, and more of us need to recognize and to see the diversity of us, both within the community and outside of the community, and to
Absolutely.
understand that we are so beautiful.
Definitely. I mean, I know that that would have been a really nice note to end on. I just have one. I guess one of my last thoughts is that, I say, like, it's funny because people talk about ethnic minorities, and I'm like, well, in my family we've got Indian and Chinese, which are like over 1 billion represented around the world. And then we have what you wouldn't call the ethnic minority, which is like the white side, which is like what, 14 to 15 million Jewish people around the world. It's like, that is my minority, and I will fight for that minority in me, and
Absolutely.
that's how I feel about it.
Oh, wow. Now that's not a bad way to end. Charly, this has been a pleasure. This has been an absolute pleasure. May
Yeah,
you
it's been great.
have so much success, you, your family in the UK with your nappies.
Thank you.
No, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. And I am going to make sure that I see your latest documentary because you sucked me in with the description of it.
Thank
And
you.
again, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rivka, and thank
And
you
may our
for
paths cross again.
definitely. I would love that, to meet in person one day. And thank you for having me. Thank you for having the podcast.
Rivkush is hosted by me, Rivka Campbell. We're produced and edited by Michael Freeman. Our theme music is by Westside Gravy. We're proudly sponsored by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation and hosted by the CJN Podcast Network. To support our work and everything else the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt. Thanks for listening.
Scattered in the wind, never scattered too thin. To remember where we come from and the gold that's within. Zahav Yerushalayim, Asur Lishkoach, Hakdushat Haaretz, Shenoten Lanu Koach.